The sand never forgot blood. No matter how many times the slaves dragged rakes across the arena floor, no matter how much fresh earth they scattered over the stains, Livia could still see the ghosts of violence in every grain. She had learned to read the Colosseum's floor like a scholar reads scrolls, each dark patch a death, each groove where a gladiator had fallen to his knees, each depression where bodies had been dragged away. Her left leg throbbed as she limped across the sand, the twisted scar tissue pulling tight with each step. The iron brand on her shoulder, the mark of the Domus Flaviana, burned in the morning sun as if freshly applied. 3 years had passed since the day she'd thrown herself between Marcus Valerius and a Thracian sword. 3 years since she'd saved the life of Rome's greatest gladiator. 3 years since he'd looked at her ruined leg and turned away. "Move faster, cripple!" The overseer's whip cracked the air beside her head. Livia didn't flinch. She'd learned not to give them that satisfaction. She dragged the bucket of entrails toward the beast pens beneath the arena, where the lions and tigers waited in their cages, hungry and restless. The smell of rotting meat mixed with animal musk and her own sweat. This was her world now, not the privileged position she'd once held as body servant to Marcus, but the lowest depth of the ludus, where only the broken and the forgotten dwelt. The memory came unbidden, as it always did when she was alone in the dark. Marcus's face above her in the sand, his eyes wide with something that might have been fear or gratitude. She'd pushed him aside just as the Thracian's blade descended, meant for his throat. Instead, it had caught her leg, shattering bone and severing muscle. The crowd had roared. They always roared when blood was spilled, but their roar had turned to disappointment when they realized it was only a slave who'd fallen, not their champion. Marcus had stood over her for 3 heartbeats. She'd seen something break in his expression, some calculation being made. Then he'd raised his sword, saluted the Emperor's box, and walked away while she screamed. By sunset, she'd been sold to the beast keepers. By dawn, Marcus had purchased a new body slave, one with 2 good legs and unblemished skin. "I'll come back for you," he'd promised the night before, when they'd lain together in his quarters, his calloused hands gentle on her face. "One more victory, one more purse, and I'll buy your freedom. We'll leave Rome together." Lies. All lies spoken in darkness and forgotten in the light of glory. Livia reached the first pen and dumped the bucket's contents through the bars. A scarred lioness emerged from the shadows, golden eyes reflecting the torchlight. The beast had been captured in Africa, starved and beaten until she'd learned to kill on command. Livia understood her perfectly. "Eat," she whispered. "Grow strong. Maybe they'll set you free too." The lioness regarded her with an intelligence that seemed almost human, then bent to feed. Above, in the tunnels that honeycombed the Colosseum's foundation, Livia could hear the morning preparations beginning. Gladiators would be training in the practice yards. Merchants would be setting up their stalls, selling wine and pastries to the crowds that would soon fill the seats. And Marcus would be in his private quarters being oiled and perfumed by his new slave, preparing for another day of glory. She'd seen him only twice since her maiming, once from a distance as he'd processed through the streets in a victory parade, crowned with laurels and showered with flowers. The second time, she'd been carrying water when he'd passed through the beast pens with a senator's party, giving them a tour of the ludus. His eyes had passed over her as if she were stone, as if she'd never cried out his name in passion, never held him while he wept over the men he'd killed, never taken a blade meant for his heart. That second glance had killed whatever foolish hope still flickered in her chest. She was nothing to him now, less than nothing, a reminder of weakness, of the moment he'd needed saving. Men like Marcus Valerius couldn't afford such memories. They had to be gods, untouchable and eternal, or the crowd would tear them apart. Livia finished feeding the beasts and began the long, painful climb back to the surface. Her legs screamed with each step, but she'd learned to breathe through the agony, to let it fuel something harder and colder than the girl she'd once been. That girl had believed in love. That girl had trusted in promises made under moonlight. That girl was dead, her corpse left to rot in the sand while Marcus ascended to immortality. She emerged into the service corridors just as a group of gladiators passed, their bodies gleaming with oil, their muscles sculpted by endless training. They laughed and joked, placing bets on the afternoon's games. One of them, a Germanic giant with blonde braids, noticed her and made an obscene gesture. His companions roared with laughter. "What's wrong, little mouse?" he called. "Missing your hero? I hear Marcus Valerius likes his slaves whole, not broken." Livia kept walking, her face a mask. She'd learned that too. How to be invisible. How to let insults slide off like water from oiled skin. Anger was a luxury slaves couldn't afford. But at night, alone in her cell, she let herself remember. She let herself hate. The afternoon sun beat down on the Colosseum's white stone as 50,000 Romans filled the seats, eager for blood and spectacle. Livia watched from the Beastkeeper's entrance, a shadow among shadows, as the games began. Criminals were fed to the lions first, thieves and rebels and slaves who dared to run. The crowd cheered as flesh was torn and screams echoed off marble walls. Then came the gladiators. Marcus entered last, as befitted his status. The crowd's roar became deafening, a physical force that shook the ancient stones. He wore his signature armor, bronze and leather, polished until it caught the sun like molten gold. His helmet bore the crest of Jupiter's eagle. His shield was painted with scenes of his greatest victories. He raised his sword to the emperor's box, and even from a distance Livia could see the absolute confidence in his stance. He'd perfected the role. He'd become the god the crowd demanded. His opponent was a Nubian fighter, massive and quick, armed with a trident and net. They circled each other while the crowd chanted Marcus's name like a prayer. The fight was brutal and efficient. Marcus feinted, dodged, and drove his gladius through a gap in the Nubian's guard. The bigger man fell, and Marcus stood over him, sword raised, waiting for the crowd's judgment. Thumbs down, always thumbs down for Marcus's fights. The crowd wanted death, and Marcus gave it to them, quick and clean. The Nubian's blood darkened the sand. Livia felt nothing as she watched the man who'd promised her freedom take another life. The girl who'd loved him was gone. In her place stood something harder, something that had been forged in betrayal and tempered in pain. As Marcus took his victory lap, showered with flowers and adoration, Livia turned away. She had beasts to feed, cages to clean, a life of servitude stretching endlessly before her. This was her fate, and she'd learned to accept it. But that night, as an unnatural darkness began to creep across the sun, as whispers of rebellion and treason began to filter through the ludus, Livia would learn that fate could be rewritten, that the gods were not as untouchable as they seemed, and that sometimes the broken were the only ones strong enough to bring down an empire. The eclipse was coming, and with it, everything would change. The eclipse began at the 9th hour, when the sun should have been at its brightest. Instead, darkness crept across its face like a slow-moving plague, turning the afternoon sky to twilight. Livia watched from the beast pens as 50,000 Romans fell silent in the Colosseum above. Even the animals sensed it. The lions ceased their pacing. The tigers retreated to the corners of their cages, and an eerie quiet descended over the ancient stone corridors. "An omen," whispered old Decimus, the head beast keeper, his gnarled hands trembling as he made the sign against evil. "The gods are angry." Livia said nothing. She'd stopped believing in gods the day Marcus walked away, but she believed in omens. The Colosseum had taught her that much. Blood always preceded blood, and darkness always heralded darker things to come. The games were suspended. The crowd dispersed in nervous clusters, their earlier bloodlust replaced by superstitious dread. Livia caught fragments of whispered conversation as senators passed through the tunnels. The emperor, dying. Succession crisis. The Praetorians won't stand for it. By the time the sun emerged from shadow, the entire city had transformed. Livia felt it in the air, the electric tension of impending violence, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. That night, sleep was impossible. The slaves' quarters beneath the ludus were thick with whispered rumors. The Emperor Hadrian was on his deathbed, they said. The Senate was fracturing into rival factions, and somewhere in the depths of Rome, the gladiators were preparing to rise. Livia lay on her straw pallet when she heard them, voices, muffled and distant, echoing up through the stone. She pressed her ear to the floor and listened. The tone was unmistakable. Urgency, secrecy, conspiracy. Moving as silently as her ruined leg allowed, Livia slipped from her cell and descended deeper into the ludus, following the voices down passages she'd never explored. The beast pens gave way to older tunnels, ancient Roman engineering now used for storage and forgotten. The voices grew louder. Can't trust the Praetorians. Half are loyal to Severus, the others can be bought. We have weapons cached in the catacombs. 200 gladi, armor for 100 men. And what of Marcus? Without him, half the fighters won't join us. Livia froze. Through the gaps between ancient pillars, she could see them, a dozen gladiators, their faces lit by flickering torches. She recognized Quintus the Gaul and Cassius the Greek, survivors of countless fights. But it was the figure at the center who made her breath catch. Marcus Valerius stood with his arms crossed, still wearing the fine tunic he'd donned after the cancelled games. Even in torchlight, he was magnetic. The same sharp features that had once whispered promises, the same powerful frame that had once held her safe. I didn't survive 200 fights to die in a doomed rebellion, Marcus said, his voice carrying natural authority. The Praetorians will crush any uprising. We'd be slaughtered. Spartacus nearly brought Rome to its knees, Quintus growled. If we strike now, while the succession is uncertain, Spartacus was crucified on the Appian Way along with 6,000 of his followers. Marcus interrupted. I won't lead men to that fate. Then you're still a slave, a new voice said. Lucius Marcellus, a former centurion condemned to the arena, stepped into the light wearing expensive civilian clothes. You sleep on silk and eat from silver, but you're property all the same. When age steals your speed, you'll die in the sand like every other gladiator. Is that the legacy you want? Marcus's jaw tightened. Livia knew that expression. It meant he was listening. What are you offering? Marcus asked quietly. Freedom, Lucius said. Not just for you, but for every man who wears arena chains. We have support in the Senate, men who see the games as wasteful spectacle. End the games, end the system that makes men into animals. The people love the games, Marcus countered. The people love bread and circuses because they have nothing else. Give them victories in foreign wars, expansion and prosperity, and they'll forget the arena. But it requires courage. Someone willing to be more than a performing dog. The words struck home. Livia saw it in how Marcus's shoulders tensed, in the flicker of anger that crossed his face. He'd always been sensitive about his status, celebrated yet enslaved, worshipped yet owned. I need time, Marcus said finally. 3 days. I'll have an answer then. The conspirators exchanged glances, then nodded reluctantly. The meeting dissolved, gladiators slipping away in different directions. Livia pressed herself against the pillar as they passed within feet of her hiding place. Marcus left last, walking alone through the ancient tunnels. For a moment, Livia considered confronting him. But what would she say? And what would he do? Kill her to preserve the secret? No, she was nothing to him now. She waited until his footsteps faded, then began the painful climb back to her cell. A gladiator rebellion, support in the Senate, and Marcus at the center of it all. She was almost back to the slaves' quarters when she heard the boots. Heavy military marching in formation. Praetorian guards flooded into the ludus. Livia flattened herself against the wall as they passed. Search every cell, their commander ordered. Find Marcus Valerius. The emperor wants him brought to the palace immediately. They knew. Somehow they knew about the conspiracy. Within minutes, the ludus erupted into chaos. Slaves were dragged from cells, questioned and beaten. Gladiators were shackled and hauled away. Through gaps in the walls, Livia caught a glimpse of Marcus being marched past in chains, his face bloodied. Their eyes met for just an instant. Recognition flickered across his features, surprise, perhaps shame. Then he was gone, swallowed by darkness and armored bodies. The Praetorians tore through the ludus for hours. By dawn, an eerie quiet had settled over the complex. Those who remained moved like ghosts, afraid to speak. 3 days later, Livia was scrubbing blood from the practice yard when 2 Praetorians appeared. You, the crippled one. You're to come with us. Terror seized her. I've done nothing. Commander Severus wants to speak with you. Now. They marched her to the Lannista's private office, now occupied by a man in the crimson cloak of the Praetorian Guard. Titus Severus was perhaps 50, his face weathered by distant campaigns, his eyes sharp as any blade. He studied her with the calculating gaze of a predator. "Leave us," he told the guards. When they'd gone, he gestured to a chair. "Sit." Livia remained standing. "I prefer to stand, sir." A thin smile crossed his lips. "Proud even in rags. I can see why Marcus kept you." He circled her slowly. "You were seen 3 nights ago near the old pillars. You heard things that could be considered treason." Her throat went dry. "I heard nothing, sir." "Don't lie." His voice cracked like a whip. "Marcus Valerius is accused of plotting against the Emperor. A dozen gladiators have confessed under interrogation. And you, little mouse, are going to help me catch the rest of the conspirators. I don't understand. You're going to find Marcus for me," Severus said. "We had him in custody, but his confederates broke him out 2 nights ago. Killed 3 of my men doing it. Now he's hiding in Rome's underbelly, and the rebellion is still brewing. They're waiting for their champion to give the signal." He stepped closer. "Here's your choice, slave. Hunt down Marcus Valerius and bring him back alive, and I'll grant you freedom. A purse of gold, a real life away from this place. Refuse, and I'll throw you into the arena during the condemned games, crippled leg and all." The crowd does love novelty. Livia's world tilted. Hunt Marcus? The man who'd abandoned her, who'd left her to rot. But also freedom. The one thing she'd been promised and denied. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because Marcus knows my men. He can smell a Praetorian a mile away." "But you?" Severus smiled coldly. "You're a crippled slave beneath notice. He won't see you coming. And I suspect you have motivation. Use that. Make him trust you again." Her hands clenched into fists. The audacity to use her pain, her betrayal, as a weapon against him. "I'll do it," Livia heard herself say. "Not for Rome's glory, not for your emperor, but for my own justice." Severus's smile widened. "I don't care about your reasons, girl. Just bring me Marcus Valerius. You have 10 days. After that, you go to the lions." He dismissed her with a wave. As Livia limped back through the ludus, her mind churned with dark possibilities. She would find Marcus. She would look him in the eyes and make him answer for what he'd done. The eclipse had been an omen after all. The broken slave was about to become a hunter, and her prey was the only man she'd ever loved. Dawn broke over Rome like a wound, red and angry against the eastern sky. Livia stood in the courtyard of the Domus Flaviana, waiting as instructed, her few possessions bundled in a cloth sack. The morning air carried the scent of bread from nearby bakeries mixed with the ever-present stink of the Tiber. She'd barely slept, her mind churning with the impossible task ahead. Find Marcus Valerius. Bring him back alive. Earn her freedom through betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on her. She would gain liberty by destroying the man who'd promised it to her first. "You look like death warmed over," a voice said behind her. Livia turned to find a young woman approaching, perhaps 20 years old, with the bearing of someone born to neither slavery nor nobility. She wore a simple tunic and carried a leather satchel. "I'm Cassia. Commander Severus sent me to prepare you." "Prepare me for what?" "For not looking like a ludus slave." Cassia gestured to a nearby fountain. "Sit, we have work to do." For the next hour, Cassia transformed her. She washed the grime from Livia's skin and hair, applied oils that made her smell like lavender instead of beast pens, and dressed her in a plain but clean stola, the kind a freedwoman of modest means might wear. She even provided a wooden crutch, better crafted than the crude stick Livia had been using. "There," Cassia said, stepping back to assess her work. "You look almost human now. Who are you?" Livia asked. "You're not military. I'm a frumentaria, one of Commander Severus's informants. I work the markets, the taverns, places where soldiers stand out but women don't." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "A word of advice, don't trust Severus. He'll promise you the world, but he only keeps his word when it serves him. Get what you need in writing, witnessed by a magistrate, or you'll find yourself back in chains the moment Marcus is captured." Before Livia could respond, boots echoed across the courtyard. Titus Severus emerged from the shadows, flanked by 2 Praetorians. He looked tired, his eyes bloodshot, but his gaze was sharp as ever. "Good," he said, examining Livia. "You'll pass for a civilian now. Cassia will be your contact. Every 3 days, you'll meet her at the Fountain of Mercury in the Forum. Report what you've learned." If you need resources, coin, information, documents, she'll provide them. And if I find him? Livia asked. How do I bring him in? Severus smiled thinly. You don't. You send word through Cassia, and my men will handle the rest. Your job is simply to locate him and keep him in place. Marcus may be a fighter, but he's arrogant. He'll never suspect a crippled former lover of being a threat. The words stung, but Livia kept her face neutral. Where do I start? The sewers beneath the Colosseum, Severus said. My sources say the escaped gladiators have been hiding in the old tunnels, the ones built during Nero's reign. There's an entire network down there, forgotten by most of Rome. Marcus knows those passages better than anyone. He trained in them, preparing for the naval battles they used to stage in the flooded arena. He gestured, and one of the Praetorians stepped forward, handing Livia a small bronze token. Show this at the northwest entrance to the Colosseum. The guard will let you pass. Tell anyone who asks that you're looking for your brother, a gladiator who escaped during the raid. Play the desperate sister searching for family. People remember emotion better than faces. Livia tucked the token into her belt. And if the gladiators don't believe me, if they think I'm a spy, then you'll die in those tunnels, and I'll find another way to catch Marcus. Severus's voice was matter-of-fact, devoid of sympathy. But I don't think that will happen. You have something more valuable than any cover story, genuine hurt. Marcus wronged you. That pain is real, and people can sense authenticity. Use it. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Marcus Valerius isn't the man you remember. Prison changed him. According to the gladiators we've interrogated, he's become something of a zealot. He truly believes he can end the games, free every slave in Rome's arenas. It's made him dangerous, not just to the emperor, but to himself. He'll take risks no sane man would take. Good, Livia said quietly. That makes him easier to find. Severus studied her for a long moment, something like approval flickering in his eyes. You're harder than you look, girl. Perhaps you'll survive this after all. He nodded to Cassia. Get her to the Colosseum, and Livia, 10 days. Don't waste them. The Praetorians departed, their crimson cloaks swirling like blood in water. Cassia waited until they were out of earshot, then turned to Livia with a serious expression. He's testing you, she said. Severus doesn't trust anyone, least of all desperate slaves he's forced into service. He'll have others watching, making sure you don't run or betray him. If you try to escape Rome, you'll be caught before you reach the city gates. If you warn Marcus about the trap, Severus will know. Your only path is forward. I understand, Livia said, though her stomach churned with anxiety. Take me to the Colosseum. They walked through Rome's waking streets, past vendors setting up their stalls, past slaves carrying water from public fountains, past the great temples where priests performed dawn sacrifices. The city smelled of wood smoke and human waste, glory and decay intermingled. Livia had rarely ventured beyond the ludus during her years of service. Slaves didn't get to see Rome, only serve it. Now, limping through the crowded streets with her new crutch, she felt both liberated and terrified. She was free in body but enslaved by circumstance, hunting a man who haunted her dreams. The Colosseum loomed ahead, its white marble facade gleaming in the morning sun. Even empty, it radiated power, a monument to Rome's dominance, built on the backs of slaves and the blood of gladiators. How many men had died in that arena? How many more would die if Marcus's rebellion succeeded and Rome's legions crushed it? The entrance is around the back, Cassia said, leading her through a narrow alley. The guard's name is Publius. He's on Severus's payroll. Show him the token, tell him you're looking for your brother Gaius, and he'll let you into the service tunnels. After that, you're on your own. They reached a small wooden door set into the Colosseum's foundation. Cassia knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. The door opened to reveal a burly man in a guard's uniform, his face scarred from old fights. Yeah? He grunted. Livia held up the bronze token. Commander Severus sent me. I'm looking for my brother. Publius examined the token, then her, his eyes lingering on her twisted leg. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him. Your brother got mixed up with the wrong people, girl. Best to forget him and move on with your life. He's all the family I have left, Livia said, letting desperation creep into her voice. It wasn't hard. She'd felt that emotion often enough to recall it perfectly. Please. I just need to know if he's alive. The guard sighed, then stepped aside. The tunnel split 3 ways once you're down there. Left goes to the beast pens. You know those already. Right goes to the old flood channels. Haven't been used in years, dangerous as Hades. Straight ahead goes to the catacombs beneath the city. That's where the escapees are hiding, if anywhere. Take a torch from the wall and watch your step. Those tunnels weren't built for cripples. Livia stepped through the doorway into darkness. Behind her, she heard Cassia whisper, 3 days. Fountain of Mercury. Don't be late. Then the door closed, and she was alone. The tunnel was cool and damp, water dripping from ancient stonework. Livia took a torch from its sconce and held it high, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The passage descended steeply, and her bad leg throbbed with each step. She could hear water running somewhere below, and distant sounds that might have been voices or might have been echoes playing tricks. She thought of Marcus down here somewhere, hiding like a rat in Rome's forgotten places. The great champion, reduced to a fugitive. Part of her savored the image. Another part, the part she tried to suppress, wondered if he was hurt, if he was afraid, if he ever thought of her. Fool, she muttered to herself. He stopped thinking of you the moment your leg was ruined. But she pressed forward anyway, deeper into the darkness, following the path that would lead either to her freedom or her death. Somewhere ahead, in the maze of ancient tunnels beneath Rome's greatest monument, Marcus Valerius was waiting, and Livia intended to find him. The torch guttered as a draft swept through the passage. She steadied it and continued, counting her steps to maintain her bearings. 50 paces, then the tunnel split as Publius had said, left, right, or straight ahead. Straight ahead to the catacombs, to the rebellion, to Marcus. Livia adjusted her grip on the crutch and limped forward into the darkness. Behind her, Rome carried on with its daily business. 50,000 souls unaware that beneath their feet, a crippled slave was about to change the course of history, or die trying. The catacombs smelled of death and damp stone. Livia descended deeper into Rome's bowels, her torch casting dancing shadows on walls carved with ancient symbols. The passage narrowed, forcing her to turn sideways, her crutch scraping against rock worn smooth by centuries. Every sound echoed, her breathing, her footsteps, the distant drip of water. She'd been walking for what felt like hours when she heard it. The ring of metal on metal, distant but unmistakable. Someone was forging weapons in the darkness. Livia extinguished her torch and continued in blackness, one hand trailing along the wall. Her eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a faint glow ahead, firelight flickering around a bend. The hammering grew louder, accompanied now by voices. Need 50 more gladi by week's end. Then we raid the armory at the Castra Praetoria. That's suicide. Severus has tripled the guards. Livia crept closer. The passage opened into a vast chamber, an ancient cistern, now repurposed as a rebel stronghold. Dozens of men filled the space, some sharpening weapons, others huddled around maps scratched into dirt. The air was thick with smoke from a makeshift forge. And there, standing near the center, was Marcus Valerius. He looked different, thinner, harder, his shoulders tight with tension. He wore a simple tunic instead of arena finery, and his arms bore fresh scars. But his voice remained the same, carrying that natural authority. We have sympathizers inside the Praetorians, he was saying. They'll smuggle weapons out if we guarantee their family's safety. And can we? Quintus the Gaul demanded. We're fugitives living in sewers. We can't protect ourselves, let alone civilians. Which is why we strike when the emperor dies. Lucius Marcellus interjected. There will be chaos, a perfect moment. The men need training, Marcus said quietly. Most gladiators know arena fighting, not street warfare. Perhaps your heart isn't in this, Lucius said, his tone sharpening. Perhaps you're still more concerned with glory than freedom. Marcus spun, hand dropping to his gladius. Question my commitment again, and we'll settle this the old way. The chamber fell silent. These were dangerous men, held together by shared hatred but divided by pride. A new voice cut through the tension, young, female, sharp. Someone's here. Livia's blood turned to ice. A girl emerged from the shadows behind her, perhaps 16, blade in hand. "Found her lurking," the girl called out. "Probably a spy." Hands seized Livia, dragging her into torchlight. She stumbled, her crutch clattering away, and fell hard onto stone. Someone kicked her ribs, and she gasped. "Wait!" The voice cut through the chaos. "Don't touch her." Through watering eyes, Livia looked up to find Marcus standing over her, his face showing shock and guilt. "Livia?" He breathed her name like a curse. "What are you doing here?" She struggled to her feet, refusing his offered hand. "Looking for you." "Who sent you?" Quintus demanded, gladius drawn. "No one." The lie came easily. "I heard guards talking about escaped gladiators. I thought I might find you." "Why?" Marcus's voice was barely audible. "After what I did?" This was the moment. Livia let herself remember the pain of abandonment. Let it show. "Because I'm still a slave," she said, her voice breaking. "Because every day I scrub blood from sand and feed beasts. Because you promised me freedom once, and I'm here to collect that debt." Silence. Then Lucius laughed coldly. "The crippled girl wants to be a rebel." "She's a liability," Quintus growled. "I know the ludus better than any of you," Livia shot back. "Guard rotations, weak points, where weapons are stored. I know which overseers can be bribed and which slaves might be turned. You want to free the gladiators? I can help." Marcus studied her. "Or you're Severus's spy, here to learn our plans and betray us. If I were his spy, would I come alone? Would I announce myself so clumsily?" Livia held his gaze. "I'm here because I have nowhere else. Because the man I loved, the man I saved, threw me away like garbage. If you want to turn me out, fine. But don't call me a traitor when you betrayed me first." Marcus flinched as if struck. For a moment, Livia saw past his armor to the haunted man beneath. "Let her stay," he said finally. "But she's my responsibility. If she betrays us, the blood is on my hands." "Marcus," Quintus began. "I said let her stay." His voice brooked no argument. "Give her food, water, rest. We'll discuss her usefulness in the morning." The rebels dispersed reluctantly. The girl who discovered her, Julia, brought bread and watered wine without a word. Marcus remained, standing awkwardly nearby. In the torchlight, Livia could see the toll his imprisonment had taken. Fading bruises, healing cuts, haunted eyes. "Your leg," he said finally. "Does it still pain you?" "Every day." She bit into the bread. "Every single day." "Livia, He stopped, struggling with words. "What I did was unforgivable. I told myself it was mercy, that you'd be better off." "Stop." She held up a hand. "I didn't come for apologies. I came because the system that made you a god made me nothing, and I want to burn it all down." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "You always were stronger than you looked. I had to be. You made sure of that." He gestured toward a makeshift pallet in an alcove. "Rest. Tomorrow, Lucius will want to hear everything you know." "Nothing worth doing is easy," Livia said, settling onto the pallet with a grimace. "I learned that watching you fight." Marcus turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I never stopped thinking about you." "That's worth nothing," Livia said coldly. "Thoughts don't free slaves. Actions do." He nodded once, then walked away into the shadows. Livia lay back and stared at the stone ceiling. In 3 days, she would meet Cassia at the Fountain of Mercury and report everything. The location, the numbers, Marcus's presence. Severus would send his praetorians, and the rebellion would be crushed, and she would have her freedom, purchased with the blood of the man who'd once promised her the same. Her hand drifted to her twisted leg, tracing the scar. Marcus had given her this wound by teaching her to love him, by making her believe she could be more than property. But that girl was dead. In her place was something harder, colder, more dangerous. A hunter who'd found her prey, and now had to decide whether to spring the trap. 3 days until she met Cassia. 3 days to gather information. 3 days to determine whether her desire for freedom was stronger than the traitorous whisper of her heart that still remembered loving Marcus Valerius. In the darkness, surrounded by men preparing for war, Livia closed her eyes and tried to silence that whisper. But it persisted, stubborn as the pain in her leg, reminding her that some wounds never healed. They only taught you to live with the bleeding. The first 2 days in the catacombs passed in a blur of whispered conversations and suspicious glances. Livia mapped every tunnel, counted every fighter, memorized every face. She learned the rebellion numbered nearly 80 men, escaped gladiators, sympathetic slaves, even disgraced soldiers. She learned their weapons cache held barely enough arms for half that number. She learned that Lucius Marcellus was the true architect of the uprising, while Marcus remained its reluctant symbol. And she learned that Marcus Valerius was a man haunted by ghosts. She watched him train younger fighters, correcting their stances, teaching them to fight as a unit. She saw him sit alone during meals, staring at nothing, food untouched. She heard him wake screaming in the night, crying out names of men he'd killed, men whose faces he couldn't forget. The Marcus she'd loved had been confident, almost arrogant. This Marcus was broken inside, held together only by fragile hope that he could undo some small portion of the blood on his hands. It made hating him more difficult. And that terrified her. On the third morning, Livia slipped away before dawn. The tunnels were burned into her memory, left at the cistern, straight through the aqueduct, right at the eagle marking. She moved as quickly as her leg allowed, counting minutes until her meeting with Cassia. She emerged near the forum just as the city woke. Livia pulled her shawl over her head and limped toward the fountain of mercury, heart hammering. Cassia was already there, pretending to fill a water jug. "You're late. Severus is impatient." "I found them," Livia said quietly, kneeling as if to wash her hands. The old cistern beneath the Colosseum's east wall. 80 fighters. Marcus is there, along with Lucius and the other leaders. Cassia's hands stilled. 80? Severus thought half that number. They've been recruiting. The rebellion is larger than anyone suspected. And Marcus? Livia hesitated. Lucius leads. Marcus follows. But the men worship Marcus. They'll do whatever he says. Then he's the key. Cassia stood. Severus will strike tomorrow night, during the Feast of Janus. The rebels will expect celebration in the streets. Instead, they'll find Praetorians waiting. Tomorrow? Livia's voice cracked. That's too soon, a perfect timing. The Emperor is dying. Severus needs this crushed before succession begins. Cassia's eyes held no warmth. You've done well. Your freedom will be waiting. Don't do anything foolish now. She walked away, leaving Livia kneeling beside the fountain. Tomorrow night, Severus would send soldiers into the catacombs and everyone would die, and Marcus. Marcus would die too. Livia stared at her reflection and felt something crack inside. She'd told herself this was justice, that Marcus deserved his fate. She'd told herself her freedom mattered more than the life of a man who'd abandoned her. But the Marcus she'd watched these past days wasn't the arrogant champion who'd walked away. He was a man trying to atone for sins too numerous to count, a man who woke screaming, a man who'd finally understood that glory built on blood was no glory at all, and she was about to destroy him. Livia rose slowly, her decision crystallizing. She was a fool where Marcus was concerned, but she couldn't watch him die in a trap she'd helped set. Not when she'd finally seen the man he might become. She turned her back on the forum and limped toward the catacombs, toward treason, toward the death of her one chance at freedom. When she descended back into the stronghold, she found chaos. Men rushed everywhere, weapons were being distributed, voices echoed with panic. Livia grabbed Julia's arm. What's happening? The Emperor is dead, Julia said, eyes wild. Hadrian died an hour ago. Lucius says we move tonight, before succession is announced while the city is confused. Livia's blood ran cold. Tonight. The attack was tonight. Cassia had lied or Severus had changed plans. Either way, the rebels were walking into a massacre. She pushed through the crowd until she found Marcus strapping on scavenged armor. His face was grim, resolved. Marcus, she grabbed his arm. You can't do this. It's a trap. He looked at her, suspicion flashing across his features. What are you talking about? The Praetorians know you're here. They're waiting. If you attack tonight, Severus will slaughter everyone. The words tumbled out desperately. You have to call it off. You have to run. How do you know this? His voice was dangerously quiet. Livia's throat closed. Around them, other rebels stopped to listen. Quintus moved closer, hand on his weapon. She saw the moment Marcus understood, betrayal blooming across his face. You're his spy, he said, and the words weren't angry. They were devastated. All of it was a lie. You were working for Severus from the beginning. Yes, Livia said, the confession like opening a vein. He promised me freedom if I brought you in. But I can't, her voice broke. I can't watch you die. So I'm telling you, don't attack tonight. Take your men and run. Get out of Rome while you can. She's a traitor, Quintus roared, drawing his gladius. She's been selling us out. The rebels surged forward, but Marcus raised a hand, stopping them. His eyes never left Livia's face, searching for truth. Why tell me now? He asked. You could have kept silent, collected your freedom, and watched us die. Because you were right, Livia said, tears streaming. That night before everything went wrong, you told me some things mattered more than freedom. That some things were worth fighting for even if you lost. I didn't believe you. I thought you were naive. She stepped closer, ignoring the blades pointed at her back. But you didn't learn to be cruel. You learned to be guilty. You learned that blood has weight. And I realized watching you that the man who abandoned me died in that prison cell. The man standing here now is someone different. Someone worth saving. Silence. Marcus's jaw worked. Finally, he turned to Lucius. Call it off. We're not attacking tonight. What? Lucius strode forward, face twisted with fury. Because of her lies? She's Severus's creature. If she wanted us dead, she could have stayed silent. Marcus said. Severus is expecting us to attack. That's why she's warning us. She's giving us a chance. Or leading us into a different trap. Lucius's hand dropped to his weapon. Maybe Severus wants us scattered. Easier to hunt down one by one. Then I'll go alone, Marcus said. I'll surrender myself to Severus. 1 life for 80. That's a trade worth making. No! The word burst from Livia. You can't. Why not? Marcus turned back to her, eyes holding unexpected gentleness. You gave up your freedom to warn me. The least I can do is give up my life to save these men. It's what you did in the arena. You took a blade meant for me. Now I'm returning the favor. He began unbuckling his armor. Around them, rebels muttered and argued. The fragile unity was fracturing, and at its center stood Marcus, preparing to sacrifice himself one final time. There has to be another way, Livia said desperately. There isn't. Marcus handed his gladius to Quintus. Get the men out of the city. Take the northern road toward Gaul. Live free even if I can't. He turned to leave, but Livia grabbed his arm. Marcus, please. Don't do this. I'm not doing it for you, he said gently. I'm doing it for the boy I killed in my 3rd fight. For the German I gutted in my 20th, for all the blood I spilled for Rome's entertainment. If my death buys freedom for these men, for you, then maybe the scales balance. He pulled away and walked toward the tunnel leading to the surface. To surrender. To execution, Livia watched him go, her heart shattering. She'd spent 3 years hating him, dreaming of revenge. Now, finally understanding what Marcus had tried to tell her, that some things were worth dying. For she realized that revenge tasted like ashes, and that the only thing worse than being betrayed by the man you loved was betraying him yourself. Livia didn't let Marcus get far. She caught up to him in the narrow passage leading to the surface, her twisted legs screaming with each hurried step. He heard her coming and stopped, his shoulders sagging with the weight of his decision. Don't follow me, he said without turning. This is hard enough without. Then don't make it harder. Livia grabbed his arm, spinning him to face her. Don't throw your life away on some noble gesture. These men need you. These men need to survive. And they can't do that with me leading them into Severus's trap. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. He'd cried all his tears in the dark, she realized. You gave me the truth, Livia. Let me use it. The truth is that Severus wants you alive, she said, the words tumbling out as the plan formed in her mind. He said, bring you back breathing. He needs you for something, a public execution probably, to show Rome what happens to rebels. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then I'll give him his show. No. Livia's voice turned sharp. You'll give him nothing. We're going to turn his trap against him. Behind them, footsteps echoed. Quintus emerged from the shadows, his massive frame filling the passage. The men are ready to move, he said. Lucius wants to attack anyway. Says if we're discovered, we might as well die fighting. Lucius is a fool, Marcus said. Maybe. Quintus studied them both, his scarred face unreadable. But he's not wrong. We can't run. Severus has every gate watched. We can't hide. He knows where we are. So we fight or we surrender. Those are the only choices left. There's a third choice, Livia said. She turned to Marcus, her heart pounding. You said Severus is planning to strike during the feast of Janus. That means tomorrow night. The city will be celebrating, drunk, distracted, making it easier for Praetorians to kill us in the streets. Quintus growled. Or easier for us to reach the Colosseum. Livia's eyes locked with Marcus's. You wanted to end the games. What if we burned the arena itself? Made it impossible for Rome to continue the spectacle? Silence. Then Marcus shook his head. The Colosseum is stone. It won't burn. The wooden structures will. The seating, the scaffolding, the beast pens, all wood. The oil stores, the straw, the costumes and props they use for theatrical executions. Livia had spent 3 years learning every corner of that cursed place. Set enough fires in the right places and you'll gut the Colosseum. It might stand, but it won't hold games for years. Quintus's eyes widened. She's right. And if we time it during the feast, when the Praetorians are expecting us to attack the Senate, we might actually reach it. It's suicide, Marcus said flatly. Even if we succeed in starting the fires, we'd be trapped inside when the flames spread. And Severus will have guards. Then you make your choice, Livia interrupted. Die surrendering, or die fighting for something that matters. Either way, Rome remembers, but only one death ends the games. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly something changed in his expression. The guilt and resignation faded, replaced by the fierce determination she remembered from the arena. Quintus, he said, get Lucius. Tell him we're going to need every drop of oil in the city. The next night, Rome celebrated. The streets filled with revelers honoring Janus, god of beginnings and endings. Wine flowed freely, and the feast marked both mourning for the dead emperor and hope for the new reign to come. In the chaos, no one noticed the small groups of men and women moving through the crowds toward the Colosseum, carrying bundles of straw and clay jars filled with oil. Livia moved with Marcus and 20 others, her heart hammering against her ribs. They wore stolen servants' clothes, and Marcus had shaved his distinctive beard to avoid recognition. Still, every Praetorian they passed made her breath catch. The north entrance, Marcus whispered. Publius should still be on duty. They found the small wooden door, and Marcus knocked the pattern Livia had used days before. The door opened. Publius's eyes widened when he recognized Marcus. But you're supposed to be... Marcus's fist caught him across the jaw, dropping him instantly. They dragged his unconscious body inside and secured the door behind them. Spread out, Marcus ordered. Teams of 3. Start fires in the beast pens, the storage rooms, anywhere there's wood or cloth. Meet back here in 1 hour. If you're not here by then, you're on your own. The rebels scattered into the darkness. Livia stayed with Marcus and Julia, leading them through passages she knew by heart. They moved quickly, dumping oil on wooden scaffolding, piling straw against support beams, preparing the Colosseum for its own funeral pyre. They were in the main beast pens when they heard the boots. There, a voice shouted. In the lower levels. Praetorians poured into the passage, their armor gleaming in torchlight. Marcus swore and drew his gladius. Run! They fled deeper into the tunnels, but more guards appeared ahead, cutting off their escape. They were trapped, pressed back toward the arena floor itself. The gates, Livia gasped. The Gladiator gates. They open onto the sand. They burst through the wooden doors and onto the Colosseum floor. Above them, the night sky was visible through the open roof. The sand stretched empty and vast, ghostly in the moonlight. Behind them, Praetorians flooded through the gates. Light it, Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. Light it all! Julia struck flint to steel and flame blossomed. She touched it to an oil-soaked torch and hurled it back through the Gladiator gate. Fire roared to life, catching on the oil trails they'd laid. Within seconds, the wooden structures beneath the arena were burning. More torches flew. More fires started. The Praetorians hesitated, caught between their prey and the spreading flames. Smoke began to pour onto the arena floor, thick and black. Then Livia heard it, the roar of a crowd. She looked up and her blood froze. The Colosseum wasn't empty. Thousands of Romans filled the upper seats, drawn by the commotion, watching as fire and combat erupted in their sacred arena. They think it's a show, Julia breathed. She was right. The crowd was cheering, believing this was some spectacular new entertainment. They didn't realize they were watching the Colosseum's destruction. More rebels emerged onto the sand from different entrances, pursued by Praetorians. The battle spread across the arena floor as fire climbed the walls. Marcus fought like the champion he'd been, his gladius weaving patterns of death. Livia grabbed a fallen blade and defended herself as best she could, her twisted leg making every movement agony. A Praetorian came at her, and she barely parried his strike. He pressed forward, and she stumbled backward, her leg giving way. She fell, and the soldier raised his sword for the killing blow. Marcus appeared from nowhere, driving his blade through the Praetorian's side. He hauled Livia to her feet. "Stay close to me." The smoke was overwhelming now. Romans in the upper seats were beginning to panic as they realized this wasn't entertainment, this was real. They stampeded toward the exits, screaming. The Praetorians, caught between fighting rebels and controlling the crowd, began to retreat. "The north tunnel," Marcus shouted over the roar of flames. "Everyone fall back!" The surviving rebels ran, fighting their way back through passages now thick with smoke. Behind them, the Colosseum was an inferno, flames licking up ancient stone, consuming wood and flesh alike. The night sky turned orange with reflected fire. They burst out into the street, gasping and coughing. Of the 80 who'd started the rebellion, perhaps 30 remained. But as they stumbled away from the burning monument, Livia looked back and saw their victory written in fire against the sky. The Colosseum still stood, stone couldn't burn, but its heart was gone, gutted by flame. It would be years before Rome could hold games there again, years of freedom for every slave who might have died in that sand. Marcus caught her hand as they ran through the chaotic streets. "Where do we go?" "North," Livia said. "Away from Rome, away from everything. Your freedom," Marcus said. "You gave it up for this." "No," Livia replied, looking at him, really looking at him, for the first time without the weight of betrayal between them. "I think I just found it." Behind them, the Colosseum burned, and in the ashes of Rome's greatest monument, a crippled slave and a broken champion fled into the darkness, finally, impossibly free.